for taking the easy way out. Got a good reason for taking.
Do you feel like you are riding the human resources roller coaster? You bet you do. I mean, think about it. Back in the 80s, when people came to apply for a job, do you remember what it was like in the mid-80s? Please, oh, please, may I work for you? I'll come early and I'll stay late. I'll be a really good employee. Please, may I work for you? And then came the 90s. Then came the go-go 90s, particularly the mid-90s. Do you remember that? Do you remember how by the time we got to 96, 97, 98, people were jumping from job to job to job? Your biggest challenge was how do you hold on to them once you were able to recruit them? And then, when they came to apply for a job, then it was a little bit different, wasn't it? They'd kind of stride in. Sometimes they'd even look over their shoulder at you, and they'd say, "Why should I work for you, Lynn?" Or, "How much vacation do I get? And by the way, I want to take off 2 weeks. You don't have to pay me for that time, but I'll decide when." Now, we've got a different situation. Greg Churchman talked about it this morning. The employer marketplace, where you're in control. Well, sort of. Some of you are. Where you get to choose, pick and choose. Well, some of you do. Because right now, folks, here and now in the United States today, we have pockets of skilled labor crisis by geography, by industry, and by occupation. By geography, in places like Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm getting on an airplane this afternoon and flying off to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. They have 2.3% unemployment in Sioux Falls. South Dakota has the lowest unemployment of any state, 3.3. But they're not the only ones. We've got Bryan, College Station, Texas. We've got Columbia, Missouri. We've got Madison, Wisconsin, all with under 3% unemployment. And then there's health care. Health care is on the bleeding edge. You human resources directors in healthcare have my heartfelt sympathy, because you have a real problem. Healthcare is on the bleeding edge. You've got vacancy rates that I wouldn't want to deal with. In the last study that we saw that happens to be mentioned in our book, Impending Crisis, there was a vacancy rate across all health systems in the United States of 15.3% for imaging technicians, let alone nurses. The American Nursing Association tells us that 20,000 people die every year. They die because they're taken to hospitals where the nurses are overworked. And that's not just a study that they threw out there. It was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Healthcare is indeed on the bleeding edge. And then we've got individual occupations. Anybody in this audience tried to get a kitchen or bath designed recently? You'll wait weeks to see the drawing. You know why? Because we have a shortage of kitchen and bath designers. I bet you were wondering why. Now you know. If you want to get your truck repaired, your car repaired after it's been in a car wreck, you may wait because there's a shortage of collision repair mechanics. Very interesting situation. So right here, right now, we have pockets of crisis. But those aren't the only issues you're dealing with. Now, if you're the kind of person who likes to take notes, there is a note-taking guide in your big book. And Mary has hers on her lap. But she isn't doing anything to move in the direction of opening hers. And I hope that's because she's being entertained somewhat and doesn't feel like she has to take notes. Well, I have a surprise for you. My entire key for this presentation will be available to you on our website at www.hermangroup.com/kyshrm.pdf. So you don't have to lift a pen. You don't have to lift a pencil to take one note this afternoon. Is that in the book? I think so. I wouldn't swear to it. It's on these little orange pieces of paper, though, that are here. So let's look at some of the other issues that you're facing on this roller coaster called human resources. Changing worker attitudes. Have you noticed that worker attitudes have changed a little bit? Recent studies have indicated that anywhere between 30 to 40% and maybe 60 to 70% of our employees are ready to jump. Now, in our book, Impending Crisis, we have a name for it. Actually, it was coined by a social economist whose name is Scott DeGraffenreid. Scott calls it warm chair attrition. Well, we know what empty chair attrition is, right? They've gone. They've left. They've said, adios. Hasta la vista, baby. See you. But these folks are still sitting there. They're still warming their chairs. They're still attending work. They're still collecting a salary. They don't like their coworkers. They don't like their bosses. They don't like the logo on the building. They certainly don't like the company. But they're afraid. They're afraid because they're concerned that if they did leave your job, what would be out there for them? And if they did take another job, maybe they wouldn't like that job. Maybe they would discover that the crabgrass on the other side of the fence was even worse than yours. So they're staying. They're doing what we call corporate cocooning. Thank you very much, Faith Popcorn. Corporate cocooning. We sort of borrowed that from her. And what that means is they're staying in the safety and security of your little corporate cocoon, waiting for just the right moment when they can spread their wings and fly away. The folks at Monster did a little survey. And guess what words the people who answered this survey, 2 words, would like to say to their bosses. And no, it doesn't begin with an F. They wanted to say, I quit. 72% of their respondents wanted to say, I quit. What's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture is that in attempting to cut costs and pull back, we've cut the wrong things. Instead of being lean and meaningful, like what we wrote about in our book, some of the employers are being lean and mean, kind of like they were in the mid-'80s. Boy, are they in for a surprise when things really begin to turn around. Now, I have a name for this economy, by the way. I call it the I think I can economy. Because it's like the little engine that could. It's saying, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think think I can. And we're seeing signs that it's really going to begin to take off very soon. Now, a lot of people are talking about jobless economy. If you're in 3 areas, expect to be recruiting within the next 6 months. 3 areas: financial services, insurance, and real estate. Because we are expecting those 3 areas to grow very quickly. This will not be a jobless recovery in the long run. In the short run, yes, but not in the long run. Why? Because inventories, folks, are at their very lowest levels that they have ever been. Because consumer confidence, after April 11th, that's when it started to turn. April 11th, 2003, is now continuing on the upswing. April 11th was the day, it was on the front page of the Investors Business Daily, that they reported that consumer confidence was beginning to rise again. September 11th really dealt us a body blow, a bad one to our economy. We were climbing out of that recession that had started in April of 2001. And by August, we as futurists were forecasting, and by the way, you'll never hear a real futurist use the word prediction. It doesn't give us enough wiggle room. So we as futurists were forecasting that by fourth quarter, that we would be out of that recession, that employers would begin to hire again, people would begin to spend money again, the economy was really going to pick up again. That was August. Then came September 11th. And that hit us hard, very hard. In fact, it reset all of our personal values buttons, didn't it? We all began to take a different look at life. So did some of your employees. Which gets me to another issue. And that is that it's no longer work-life balance. Now it's life-work balance. Because our employees are saying, I want to have a life. Life should come first. My life should come first. And it's not just the Gen Xers who are saying this. It's the baby boomers, too. The Gen Xers started it, though. And why? Because they were the folks who were sitting around the living rooms and dining rooms of America when their parents and neighbors, and sometimes aunts and uncles and cousins, walked in, sometimes in tears. They were absolutely devastated. They had been tossed out by corporate America without so much, in some cases, as a penny to show for all of their hard work. They had given their blood, sweat, tears, and lives to those corporations. Those young people saw that, and they said, whether it was conscious or unconscious, they said, not me. That is not going to happen to me. I know I've got to take care of myself. I've got to make sure I have a life. And what's more, they said to themselves, I know I can't depend on any corporate entity to take care of me. I've got to maintain control of my own career. And that's why, when you heard your opening keynote, Scott Kaywood said that the best companies have tremendous training programs because the best employees want to work for employers that offer them training and development and lots of it. Because a very key value of our employees today, particularly the younger ones, is to stay marketable. They want to stay marketable because they don't want what happened to their relatives and friends to happen to them. And if you're not offering huge training programs, if you're not offering them the opportunity to get cross-trained and to have cross-experience, they'll probably want to leave you sooner rather than later. But that's not the only issue that you're dealing with. Corporate loyalty, for all intents and purposes, is dead. Would you agree with that? Show of hands. Corporate loyalty is dead. Most of you raised your hands. Now, I didn't say loyalty is dead. Corporate loyalty is dead. Because we're still loyal. We're still very loyal. We're just not loyal to the corporation anymore or the organization anymore. We're loyal to our coworkers and our bosses. And by the way, if you want to know what kind of leadership works in this situation where we really have a dearth of leadership, that, by the way, is one of those SAT words that means lack of, it's because we don't train our supervisors. We have a lack of leadership because we don't train our supervisors and our managers. Think about it. We have supervision by anointment in so many different companies. Joe's done a great job there at his machine. He's really kept his nose to the grindstone. He's always done as he was told. He always produced a quality product. I know we need a supervisor because we took his supervisor and we bumped him upstairs to a manager position. So let's take Joe and let's make him a supervisor. We sprinkle some fairy dust over Joe and poof, Joe is a supervisor. No training. The only role model Joe ever had was who? Previous supervisor. The guy we bumped upstairs. Well, what I forgot to mention is that we thought he'd be a little bit better as a manager than he was as a supervisor because he wasn't so good as a supervisor. So that's the only role model that Joe's had. Why is it, folks, that we don't train our supervisors and our managers, and especially our corporate executives? The Peter Principle is alive and well in corporate America. Show of hands, how many of us are old enough to remember the concept of the Peter Principle? I am, by the way. Thank you very much. Misery loves company. The Peter Principle was a little book written by Lawrence J. Peter. It came out in the 60s. And the Peter Principle says we are promoted to the level of our incompetence. Well, think about it. If someone really does a good job as a supervisor, we're definitely going to promote them to manager. And then they do a good job as a manager, so we promote them to director. And then they do a good job as director, and we promote them to a vice president. And this person has done a wonderful job as a vice president. Really engaged employees, really boosted the performance of that division. So we decide to make that person a president. Great job as president. Wonderful job. We have a CEO opening available. I know, let's take that person and make him a CEO. Now, we haven't given this person classes in how to be a CEO, but he did a good job as president. But when he doesn't do so well as CEO, what do? We give him a creative career redirection opportunity, don't we? So you can see, folks, that we are literally promoted to the level of our incompetence. The worst part of it is that we've got a situation here in the United States today where many of our young people don't want to lead. They simply don't want to lead. They see all the stress and pressure that the executives are under, and they simply don't have any interest whatsoever in having that. I'm very happy, thank you, with what I'm doing. We folks are going to have a big problem in the future because we've got so many young people. Now, when I went into the corporate arena, everybody aspired to be vice president, president, maybe even CEO. Everybody wanted to climb that corporate ladder. That's what we did, we boomers. Well, not so anymore. Because it's that life-work balance thing. And they're seeing that life is important. But I'm sorry to deliver the bad news. The dearth of leadership and changing worker attitudes is not all that you're going to have to deal with in the years ahead. We've got a huge, and I mean huge, competency deficit. Now, what do I mean by that? We've got a situation where we have thousands of jobs available in this country today. Thousands of them. And we have lots of people who don't have jobs. The problem is we don't have people who have the training that we need to put them into the jobs that are available. And then there's healthcare. Healthcare's biggest problem is that we've got lots of people who over the years were trained. They were trained to be nurses and imaging technicians. Only big problem, they're not interested in taking the jobs that we have open for registered nurses. Why? Because they don't get to do what they came into this industry to do. And by the way, while we're on the subject, I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting two people who are here today. One is named Phyllis, and I won't use last names, and the other is named Tabby. Both of them left large organizations to go with smaller organizations because they felt like they could make a difference there. Because, folks, people want to make a difference. And if I don't keep going on my outline, there is no way I'm going to get through the other 3 pages that I have to cover with you today. I need to tell you about the corporation of the future. The corporation of the future will be very different than what you see today. Imagine with me, if you will, an amoeba floating in space. Someday I hope we get to do a video about this. It's floating in space in constant movement. And there is a nucleus in this amoeba-like creature that we call the corporation of the future. And it is a tight nucleus of folks who are important, actually essential to the corporation, the top executives. And to this amoeba-like thing, which is in constant motion, is attracted groups or individuals, workers. Groups of workers, contract workers, temporary workers, attracted on. Individual free agents, attracted on. Moving with this organization for as long as it makes sense for all parties. Then what happens? The free agents leave and go join another amoeba-like moving organization. The contract workers, they leave and go to another amoeba-like moving organization. Thank God we're going to have portable health plans, portable benefit plans, because that's what you're going to be dealing with. The employees, and by the way, given that there will be shortages of skilled employees in the years ahead, are going to be coming to you and saying, this was my benefit plan at the other organization. I'd like you to match it. And if you really want that employee, you're not going to worry about paying signing bonuses. Scott DeGraff and Reed, same guy, calls that mercenary Darwinism. Mercenary Darwinism. It's going where the money is. And if you're a corporation, not a good idea. Because what happens if you pay this person $20,000 as a signing bonus and you ask them to sign a contract for 2 years? So what happens after 2 years? Of course, they want to go over here where they can get $20,000 more, right? They're going where the money is. So we urge you, put the money into your corporate culture. As Scott said on whatever morning it was, I seem to go into a time warp when I travel. During his keynote, he said, look for the little things. Look for the little things that you can do. The corporation of the future, by the way, will be tight, no waste, light, agile, and responsive. There's a concept that we call strategic agility. What that means is that corporations in the future will not have the big battleship mentality. They will move like speedboats. Speedboats can turn on a dime, can't they? A battleship requires 1.5 miles to make a turn. So the corporation of the future will be very agile. They will have might because they will have strength from focusing on their core business and outsourcing the rest. They will be values-driven. They will have a new global focus. And while we're on that concept of global focus, let me tell you, if you think that India has attracted a lot of business, there's another country that's coming on very, very strong, and that's the Philippines. How many of us have ever run into or heard about the fact that many health systems are importing Filipino nurses? Many of us, yes? Well, the Philippines is going to be one of those places offshore where we're going to export our work to. But outsourcing, offshore and domestic, is going to be an issue that you will deal with, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult, just a little bit more difficult than it sounds. Because you're going to have to deal with the human resource issues, the cultural issues of all of these different countries where you may be outsourcing along with the United States. You're going to feel like a juggler even more than you may now. You'll be spinning a Filipino plate here and a Chinese plate here and an Indian plate here, those of you who work for the big companies. And those of you who don't will probably have a less hassled life. You'll probably have a whole lot less stress. Because outsourcing, when you just focus on your core business, outsourcing allows you to export some of your people issues to the outsourced organization. Let me give you a couple of examples, very quick examples. There's a company called IHS Support Services out of the New York metro area, and they provide in-sourced help desk personnel to big companies. Now, what that means is that they provide a whole department, like Pitney Bowes does for mail departments, for mail rooms, you know. They provide a whole department on site at your company, on site, so that all you have to do is to supply the area.